Alrighty, we are live. This is Mack Bolen of IllinoisMatmen.com, and I am joined by my co-host, Rob Sherrill. Folks, we got a good one tonight, and we got a whole lot of stuff to cover in the past that took place, and preview. We got some good stuff coming up, so we'll just jump right into this, and let's start with Class A. And Rob, you were there, man on the spot at Abe's Rumble.
I was, and just as was last year, once again an outstanding event. And Lena Winslow Stockton kept their hold on number one. They went 9-0, and had a little bit of a close one the first day in the final pool match against Vandalia. It was 30-30 with 2 matches to go, and they got a pin and another win, and wound up winning that 39-30. But that was really their, except for a close one in the semis over Prairie Central, they weren't really tested by anybody else. And I really think they've got that championship mindset going at that school. And even, it was, besides them, if your name wasn't Lena Winslow Stockton, it was a pretty wide open event. But really, the biggest drama prior to the final took place in the quarterfinals, where Coal City knocked off Belleville Altoff by a score of 37-34. It was 37-31 with a match to go, and which was 182. And of course, they had already used Zach Brownagle at 195 to open the meet, so he wasn't available. So really, I think so they put Cody Harris at 182, and he wound up winning the match at the end. But I actually thought that was actually a match that Coal City had the upper hand for most of it, and he was really, he just wanted to make sure that he didn't give up 6. But it was a great duel, and it's not finished by any means, and we're going to see, obviously. It adds a little bit of spice to that regional that they host at the end of the year, especially since Prairie Central beat Clifton Central, 2 other teams in the same regional, in the 3rd place match. So this is it's certainly the regional in 1A that's going to have the most drama in it. Other than, of course, the one that Lena Winslow and Dakota and Byron are all in, as they seem to be every year.
Every year.
But you talk about 4 teams there that at Coal City that all have a shot, and there's going to be some lineup juggling all the way up to the seeding meeting for that one.
Yeah, and it's a shame that just one of those teams is going to advance out of that regional. It really is.
Yeah, really, because all 4 of them should be in the field.
Absolutely.
I think everybody agrees with that, and it's just it is what it is. I'll say again, the IHSA confuses championships with tournaments, because the fact is they'll tell us over and over and over again that you can only have one state champion, and that's another discussion for another time.
Absolutely.
But even though they've only given us one state champion, they have given us, for the last 34 years, 2 state tournaments. And they really, if they're going to continue to give us 2 state tournaments, then they really owe it to us to allow them to run as separately conducted events, since they're really 2 separate sports.
Absolutely. So anything else in 1A? Obviously, Abe's Rumble was the big.
Abe's Rumble was the big one, and there were. Of course, the New Year's Challenge is still an event over at Danville, and really the story there was Rock Island Dolleman upsetting Clinton on the second day, and both of those teams actually wound up 8-1 in the event. Rock Island Dolleman lost in the tournament to Westville, a team that Clinton beat in the same event. But Dolleman, of course, with the head-to-head win over Clinton, got first place in that event. So, Clinton went 10-0 last year, really without a close match, and Dolleman is much improved with a lot of freshmen this year, and they had a great December, and they kept it going at the New Year's Challenge.
All righty. And as far as 2A, we had 2A teams actually competing in events which were loaded with 3A teams too, and obviously Washington being one of them going out to the Clash. But anything that was more maybe just specifically 2A or?
Well, we haven't talked much yet about the DeKalb duels,
right?
And of course, there were quite a few 2A teams that wound up in that event. We can talk about that a little more when we get to 3A. But I think there was very little movement in 2A over the break. It was really primarily as far as what happened during the holidays. It was primarily a 3A and a 1A showcase. I think sure. Bloomington, the week of the Dvorak, did beat Muhammad Seymour handily to take more or less take control of Central Illinois. 54-18 was that score there. Unfortunately, once again, they're in the same regional with Washington.
Of course.
And while Muhammad Seymour once again gets to go south, and we're talking two schools that are on I-74 about less than 30 miles apart. So it's sort of a case of one school lives right and the other one doesn't, apparently.
Yeah,
but that was in terms of a match that I would point to that was really important, had really important 2A implications. That was probably it, So that is 2A in a nutshell, and of course, Washington continued to show that they have not lost much, if any, ground from the last 2 years.
No, and for those people who don't know, Bloomington and Muhammad Seymour have a great rivalry. I mean, and it's one that goes back for years. They really do,
and they're not in the same conference, but obviously they're very they're very close together in proximity, and you just have to wonder why the assignments are as they are, because they help one school greatly and really kill the other school in the current landscape of what 2A is.
And they've been two of the more prolific downstate programs through the years too. Right. It's unfortunate, and we all know about Washington. We'll get speaking about them later. So Move to 3A, a lot of stuff over the last few weeks in 3A. Huge stuff. We talked a little bit, the DeKalb Flavin tournament, which I think they expanded their field this year.
Yes, they went. They doubled it. They went to 32 teams, and as it turned out, nobody went undefeated in that tournament.
Nope. Criteria, baby.
The first bracket on the second day, Lincoln Way West and Wheaton North and DeKalb, the hosts, all went 2-1 in that pool, and all split with each other. And Lincoln Way West on points wound up winning it. Their loss was to Wheaton North, but they already owned a win over Wheaton North this season. So all that did was even the score between the two schools this year. That was a very competitive first division between those three teams, and with Lincoln Way East being the fourth team in that first pool. And we had a criteria decision, but in fact, DeKalb had a chance to win it all by themselves in that final round, but wound up losing to Lincoln Way West and lost by 14. So that was enough to get Lincoln Way West the point differential that they needed to win the championship. And with DeKalb, with Wheaton North wine.
Yeah.
So it really was a great event. A lot of really close matches with and if you look at the second bracket with St. Charles East, Naperville Central, Glenbard East, Glenbard East and Prospect, I think there were two matches in that bracket that went to criteria. So very, very tightly contested.
Very competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, St. Charles East had a criteria match and two 1-point matches in that tournament, showing you how competitive it was. They actually lost 2 out of the 3. So St. Charles East is 23-2 with 2 losses by a combined 1 point. So they're really 3 wins away from being undefeated.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. After the whole Lincoln Way quagmire, if you want to call it, got sorted out, how Lincoln Way West has kind of emerged from that as the top team in that area.
Yes, and here's an interesting stat based on that. As of the end of the holiday wrestling competition, Lincoln Way West now has 9 wins against my 3A top 25, which is more than any other team. So So in fact, they're 9-3, which includes both ends of the split with Wheaton North against the 3A top 25, and that's the best of any team in the top 25. Next best is Stevenson, which despite the fact they're only 11th, they are 7-1 against the top 25, and no other team has more than 5 wins. Lockport has 5. They're actually 5-6 against the top 25, and Sandburg is 5-1 against the top 25. So if you're looking at with teams with the most, at least in-state quality wins in 3A, those are the 4 right now. And I should mention also DeKalb also has 5 wins against the top 25. They're 5-2.
Great.
those are the teams at this point with the most quality wins against the 3A top 25. So kudos to those 5 teams.
Okay, so now let's move to Dvorak.
Yeah, well, it certainly was interesting, and a lot of a fair amount of out of state champions here. I don't know who got the OW in this tournament because it's not in the brackets. I think my vote probably would have gone to Noah Certain from Edwardsville. If
Good
I
choice.
had a vote.
Good choice. Good choice.
A major decision over Lucas Bird in the finals, along with Tech Falls earlier in the previous 2 rounds over Manny Ramirez of Wheeling and Justin Peters of Jacobs. So he certainly made a very strong case for himself. Jamie Suarez did a great job in winning 26 from Wheaton North. Wound up with a couple of losses in the DeKalb duels to Noah Villarreal of Aurora Christian, and I'll think of the other one that I need to pull up my.
Are we talking 126?
Yes, that
Philippe Lopez, probably from DeKalb. Yeah, probably Lopez from DeKalb.
Yes, Lopez would have been the other one.
Yeah.
Yes, lost 7-4 to Lopez. Lost a real wild match to Villarreal, 16-13.
Wow.
So that was a lot of back and forth there.
Highest finishing Illinois team at Dvorak.
That was Huntley, which finished 3rd, and just a couple of points ahead of Mount Carmel.
Mm-hmm.
So Huntley was 3rd, Mount Carmel was 4th. Luxembourg Casco, number 1 in Division II in Wisconsin, was 5th. And the rest of the top 10, all from Illinois. Wheaton North was 6th, Yorkville 7th, Belleville Altoff 8th, Edwardsville 9th, and Glenbard North tied for 10th with Waterford, Wisconsin. So
right, and LaSalle.
So good,
LaSalle, Ohio was number 1, and then Mason was number 2, if I remember correctly.
Right. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it was a very pretty close after the once you got down to second place, Mason finished only 6 points ahead of Huntley for second. So that was very competitive. But,
well, I think it's good to see a lot of the out-of-state teams coming to the Dvorak. I personally like it. We had Iowa City West show back up again, which was a good thing. I mean, they're not like they were back, say 7-8 years ago, obviously, but good to see them come back. And actually, if I remember correctly, one of the big matches was between Brands and
Brands lost in the semifinals to Alan Swanson of Oswego, who's taken over the number 1 spot at that weight. He's in 3A.
Big win.
Swanson and the other in the quarterfinals prior to his match with Brands, 16-7 over Ferrante of Huntley, and then he beat Brands 10-6, and then of course he got in the final of Althoff beat him badly 15-2.
Now Braunagel, let's face it.
That was a great, but Braunagel definitely had the easier side in this tournament, which often happens when you're the number 1 seed. Because you had Ferrante, Swanson, Anthony Mare of Glenbard North and Brands all on the other side. So
that's pretty stacked.
Brown Eagle didn't really have much of a matchup until the finals.
But to be fair, both the Brown Eagles are I mean, they're the real deal. Those guys, we can talk class, whatever, class 1A. They're both nationally ranked. Those two guys are absolute studs.
They're absolutely right. I'm just saying. I'm looking at the bracket here.
Oh,
as far as balance, it was clearly not balanced.
Yeah. Okay. So.
And then Abe Assad, another fine performance for Glenbard North at 170. He's still undefeated. Of course, the matches we thought would be great at 182 were great. Jessen had Kratiger from Waterford, Wisconsin in the semifinals. That was a 3-2 win for Jessen. And Brown Eagle had Blake Wilson of LaSalle, who placed in the Ironman.
Right.
Third, I believe. And then, of course, Jessen won in the finals by a score of 6-4, and then Kratiger came back and beat Wilson for third. So really four really good guys there.
Yeah.
And great job by Nick Stemmet of Yorkville at 195 with the 4-3 win in the finals over another Ironman placer, Michael Baker of LaSalle. Stemmet and his twin brother Ben, only sophomores, and Yorkville just has those great upper weights, and they're a major reason why. Maverick McPeak of Dakota, one of the more surprising wins to me. Prevailing in the overtime tiebreaker over the defending Wisconsin Division I state champion, Eric Bone of Mukwonago, a guy that I had in my national rankings, and deservedly so.
Oh, absolutely.
But they just had their two escapes until the two 30-second tiebreakers, and McPeak came out on top.
Yeah, McPeak kind of a tie back to the great Dakota teams, before they had a little bit of falling off. He's still, still a great wrestler, and he was a member of those good teams.
And if I had to pick a weight class in any classification that's probably the toughest and the deepest, it's McPeak's weight class in 1A, 220. You have the defending state champion there. You have McPeak. You have Cody Miller of Bismarck. You have Keaton Fogler of Olympia. That's 4 state place winners right there, and other guys that have proven themselves over the course of the year. I just think that is the deepest weight class in any of the 3 classifications this year. And you could throw, as far as I'm concerned, Lee may be a cut above, but the rest of that weight class, you could throw all the guys in a hat, and you don't know how it's going to come out.
So let's see, what else?
And then Cassiope, of course.
He
dominates at heavy.
Oh,
he was held to a couple of technical falls. In his last 2 matches. I don't. Guy Snow of Iowa City West, who I think is actually a first year starter as a senior.
Yeah.
Ranked was ranked 4th in one of the Iowa polls and 10th in the other, and but he made it all the way through to the finals. There really, I would say, there really wasn't anybody on his side of consequence, but because Charlie Schmidt of Libertyville and Keenan Ness of Yorkville, who I thought were the other two best guys in this weight. For some reason, they were both on Cassioppi's side. I think they wanted to be gracious hosts to their, to some of the out-of-state visitors here. But again, credit to Snow. He made it to the finals.
Yeah, and the match will probably won't happen this season. Hopefully we'll get to see it at the college level. The one guy I would like to see Gable Stevenson wrestle is Cassiopea.
Well, it'll happen soon. It'll happen soon enough. They're both going to wind up in the same conference.
Yep. So
just a matter of time.
Oh yeah, and that's what I'm really looking forward to, because they're both very. When you talk about heavyweights and how heavyweights wrestle, and then you have the norm, but then you have the exceptions with guys like Cassiopea, with guys like Stevenson, who are dynamic, who, just when you see them on the mat, they get after it. They have technique, they have power, they don't wrestle like what we consider, the heavier weights. Very fun to watch. And again, like down the road, that is a matchup I am absolutely looking forward to.
Sure. And, and Cassioppi is a guy who, I think still to this day doesn't really blow you away in terms of physique.
Oh, right. But no, absolutely.
But what great balance and hips and mat awareness he has.
Technique.
He has all the intangibles.
Absolutely. He is so impressive to watch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump to the Clash now. I was there firsthand, viewed the whole tournament. I want to give, right off the bat, a shout-out to Steve Elwood, the tournament director. He took over for Lance Hughes, even though he's been associated with the Clash since day one. Lance Hughes stepped down as tournament director. Elwood stepped in. And right away, he had to deal with some serious adversity. They had a bunch of teams drop out. So instead of 32, they had 29. Then they had to deal with skin issues, which caused one of the teams, one of the top teams, Shakopee in Minnesota, because of a shingles issue with one of the wrestlers, and the coach basically bailed out of the tournament after the first day. So that's really tough, and it is.
I'm sure it killed Jim to not have to be able to continue, because he's not the kind of guy that's not going to seek out the best competition for his kids, but you can't take any chances with that stuff.
Well, and it was his call. I mean, they could have wrestled. Yeah. They would have had a guy, the one guy who had the shingles. They could have just dropped him.
Yeah. You can't take any chances with that.
Right,
stuff.
Right. And they have two, and sadly, they had two of the best wrestlers, one at 106, Kreese, and Lloyd, obviously, at 145.
Sure.
That didn't even get a chance to compete on the second day. And Lloyd clearly could have been a force at the for the all tournament team, though. I will say this: Sands from Vaca in California, that dude is the real deal. He was really impressive.
Yes, he was
a brute.
He's in my national rankings. He was 4th in the state in California last year. So yeah,
he was really impressive in that tournament, and deservedly made the all tournament team.
Right.
Yeah, but I will say this: shout out to Jake Stiles of Montini. Finally broke into the Intermat national rankings. When I sent an email to Josh Lowe after I looked at the guy's resume. I said, okay, this guy has beaten Mitch Moore, Kendall Coleman, And now, in a sudden victory overtime win in the dual meet against St. Edward's, Sam Dover. And then he sent me back a thing saying, "Oh yeah, he's in. He's in."
I think he got in. I believe. Let's see, where did I have him in my pre-Christmas ranking? I think I had him number 23.
Okay.
And as everybody knows, I'm a guy who doesn't pay attention, never has paid attention to where you finish in a tournament. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Jake Stiles was 7th at the Ironman. So what?
Yep.
It doesn't. If you ran into the 2 studs in the tournament earlier than everybody else, that's just bad luck.
There you go.
What matters is who you. And I will tell you this: Stiles, except for the fact that he only wrestled 5 matches, Stiles would have gotten my vote for all tournament at the Clash.
Oh yeah, he had a great Clash. Oh absolutely, he had a great Clash.
Beat Lemaire, beat Dover, beat Steele, all guys that are ranked in their respective states. And so that's those are the kinds of things I look at. Who'd you wrestle and who do you beat? Who'd you beat? Those are the only things that matter.
Yeah, right. And like I said, he had an early season victory in the dual meet with Mount Carmel over Kendall Coleman. And then in the Ironman,
who then went on to have a great Ironman.
Oh, absolutely, and finished runner-up. And then he lost to Mitch
got to the finals by beating a lot of good guys.
Absolutely, and Stiles loses in ultimate tiebreaker.
Finals because he had easy bracket.
Yeah. And Stiles loses ultimate tiebreaker to Moore, but comes back and beats him.
Right.
In the 7th place. I mean, and goes 1-1 against him. And then in that dual meet, which I'm going to go into detail later, but the overtime sudden victory win he had 3-1 over Sam Dover. Literally, if you looked at the St. Edward bench after that match, it was like the air running out of a balloon because they had just gotten the win by Andonian at 138 over Mayora. And up to that point, they hadn't scored a point in the dang dual meet. And then one of your top guys goes down in sudden victory. Boom. Just like that. So,
well, no, that's true. That's certainly the kind of loss that you're gonna. Okay. I had Dover 4 spots ahead of Stiles, so Stiles winning was not going to be a major upset.
Oh no! But it was a thrilling match. But as in the course of the dual meet, now I'm going to go ahead and get into this in detail. Looking at the Clash brackets and when the seedings came out, my only personal disappointment is I would have liked to have seen Oak Park River Forest in either the bracket with Apple Valley or Park Hill, because I think they could have given them, either one of them, win or lose, at least a competitive duel. I knew going in they had no chance against St. Edward, based on the way the lineups
looking
were.
At these, I got to tell you, I don't. Although we could say now about how now that they've proven themselves how good Oak Park River Forest is. It's pretty obviously. I guess they got the 2nd seed in this bracket. I guess.
Right, against St. Edward. Right, in the same bracket with St. Edward. Right.
Which means they're probably the 7th seed overall, maybe, because St. Ed was probably the overall number 2. They were behind Montini. So that means you got 2 and 7 in one pool. And I guess they must have had Simley number 8 to be in Montini's pool. And
they had Anoka.
I suppose Park Hill must have been 4 and Anoka 5.
Actually, Apple Valley was the 4th seed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because
Apple Valley was the 4th seed, Park Hill 3, St. Edward 2, Montini 1.
Okay. I figured, I figured they might have been flip-flopped just because of bracket A and bracket B.
Well, they kind of goofed it, because they put Montini in the afternoon session versus the morning session, but
yeah, I see that.
Yeah. As it kind of all worked out, I was there announcing for Oak Park, and I actually announced the first day evening session for Montini as well. And watching some of it, because Powell likes to put a lot of backups in. So they wrestled Frazee, and he threw about 4 backups in that dual meet, so it probably looked closer than it could have been. He put everybody in against Ellsworth, and that was probably a little closer to it wasn't competitive. And then against St. Edward, they won just the 2 matches with Rundle and Okansanya. And the Okansanya Rinnan match was just bizarre. It was close, and Okansanya just happened to catch him on a bad move, caught him in a headlock, and pinned him. Rundle, on the other hand, what can you say? Phenomenal tournament. A kid just lights out. And in fact, we went into the second day, and 2 of the members, to include the tournament director and tournament committee, came up, and they were trying to figure out who on earth they were going to pick at 113, because, of course, you had Ragusan, who was having also a good tournament and probably would have been, deserving of all tournament team too. And then you had Rundle, who, was nationally ranked as a 106-pounder, but because to fill the hole in the lineup with Madrigal out of the lineup, and there's would have been starting 126-pounder out for the season. So they bumped the whole lineup. He's at 113. Going into the last duel against Washington, I just told him, when I talked to these guys, I said, look, go and watch both guys wrestle. Watch Ragusan in the St. Ed thing. Watch, Rundle versus Washington. And Rundle was 5-0 at that point, facing Cape from Washington, who was also 5-0. And the tournament director and 2 of the tournament committee members were there. In the second period, he threw him and pinned him. Rundle finished the tournament as a 106-pounder, wrestling at 113 with 4 pins and 2 tech falls. So, and I know some of the Montini fans would have liked to have seen Ragusan, and I understand that, and he would have been deserving, but you can't fault them for picking Rundle. His performance in that tournament was just spectacular.
Oh no, I agree completely. When you have when you have a 6-0 record against with 4 of the 6 guys that you wrestled ranked in their respective states, that's fine with me. I don't he had a far tougher road than Ragusan did.
Yeah. So overall,
and I don't say that because of the 6 for one guy and 5 for the other guy. That doesn't have anything to do with it.
Right. So
for me, the overall outstanding wrestler was Woods, and he only wrestled 5 times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He turned in a great job. And I'll tell you something else. The freshman from St. Edward, Gallagher, Luann majored him, but I'll tell you that kid is tough. That kid was lights out. I was very, very impressed with him. Overall, the tournament, they had a lot of adversity to deal with. They lost Buchanan. They got lured to the who's number 1 by Flow Wrestling. couple other teams dropped out. And as I said before, then they had the skin issue. But overall, they did a good job. I think Illinois as a state really had a very, very good clash. Glenbard North won their bracket, and the thing that was cool is their number one wrestler in their final match, which decided the bracket championship, was Abe Assad. And he goes out and gets the win, and they win their bracket.
Well, I guess there's really nobody else you would want in that situation. So
absolutely. And, Glenbard North wins their bracket. OPRF comes in and really kind of overachieves given, all the missing Madrigal and then having to bump the lineup. And, we kind of discussed this because I think we both felt that some of those Minnesota teams were a little bit overranked. I know
as I told you earlier.
Yeah.
I've never seen the Minnesota schools wrestle as poorly in their own event as I did this time. And they may have been missing a guy here and there, but they're just I think a lot of that had to do with it's everybody's bit as much how well the Illinois teams wrestled, and I think
absolutely.
This year by far, I think, is the best overall performance by the Illinois teams that were involved, and I'm not necessarily talking about the team that won it. I mean, they were. Right. They were great, but I'm talking about the overall performance by the teams that were there. I think the only Minnesota teams that wrestled as well as I thought they would, were the 1A teams from up there, Frazee and Zambroda Mazeppa. Yeah. I thought they fought hard, and I thought they gave as good an accounting of themselves as they possibly could. But I mean, Simley, what were they doing for 2 days? That was the worst. That was the worst performance by a Simley team that I think I've seen in 30 years. Awful. I'm embarrassed. That I thought that much of them going in because
they got slaughtered by Montini.
They are not what I thought they were.
No, they got slaughtered by Montini, and then Oak Park slaughtered them too in second bracket, which kind of looked like it would be competitive, but turned out to be a runaway after the Anoka duel, and I want to talk about that one specifically in a bit. They ran through Simley and Washington. And I honestly felt, the first loss they had to Washington was kind of a fluke. 2 guys forfeiting. And in that second bracket final matchup was kind of more of what I expected when they, won 43-18 over Washington. Montini, hey, I give props to Montini. They came into this tournament, and I talked to Izzy, and he admitted he did not feel they wrestled particularly well at the Ironman. The performance I saw from the Broncos at the Clash, that team came in and they were on fire. Now, granted, as we all know, the way the Clash is set up with the seedings and everything, you're going to have some mismatches, first day brackets. And then when you get into the pool competition on the second day, you have a little bit more closely matched stuff. And one of the things that I really love about the Clash, and because, I announced for Oak Park and then I got to announce for Montini as well. But like the first day, I'm in the Frazee match and a kid walks out on a mat for Frazee, and Powell wrestled like 4 backups in that duel. His name was Taylor Ishins. And I looked at the Frazee coach. I looked at Frazee coach. I said, is he a relation? He said, yeah, it's his cousin. with the Tyler Ishins in Anoka. And it was really interesting. And then in the second duel, I'm talking with a guy from Ellsworth, and he's talking about, how they're really close to Minnesota and the specific reason why they came to the Clash. As he said straight up, he says, because we want to wrestle a team like an Oak Park River Forest. We want to wrestle the kind of national level competition we don't face in our local area. And I said, you're right. And what was really cool about all of that, and, of course, Oak Park got clobbered by St. Ed's, which, I saw that coming. But then the second day, on the one hand, I'm sitting here calling the Washington duel, and I got my head on a swivel because I'm looking at Montini St. Edward, but straight across from us, I'm watching Ellsworth against Wasatch, and the teams in that fourth bracket. Every single dual meet came down to the last one or two matches, and that entire bracket, which Ellsworth won, was decided on criteria. And that's kind of like the neat thing about the Clash when you get into that second day. And like I said before, with Glenbard North coming down to the last match in that duel, and watching the championship bracket, kind of thought, and I'm sure you probably figured this too, we knew it was going to come down to St. Edward and Montini. I mean, we knew. I mean, Park Hill and Apple Valley were okay, but, just didn't think they had enough to even match one of those two teams. And on paper, I looked at St. Edward and Montini, and I saw both of them wrestle at the Clash.
I noticed Park Hill was missing Trey Crawford.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were.
That was so that that's a major loss for them.
Yep. I mean, their top Winston, De Blasio. I mean, they got what they needed out of their good guys. But I just think, and with Apple Valley, they were kind of overmatched against the top two teams. But on paper, you would look at the St. Edward and Montini duel and say, okay, it could be somewhat competitive because there were weights where you would look at Montini would be favored, particularly in the lower weights. You would look at some of the weights where St. Edward would be favored. And then you would look at all the toss-up matches. And then you look at that final dual meet score and you say, how on earth did they beat St. Edward so bad? And in a nutshell, it's because Montini won all the matches they were favored in. They won every single swing match, and they scored an upset at 126. And the fact that the dual meet started at 220 pounds kind of favored Montini. They put Christensen out there. He beat O'Malley. O'Malley was an Ironman placer. Then they get a pin in a swing match out of McNichols in the heavyweight match. They held serve all the way through 103. And the unique thing I saw, and it almost reminded me of the NCAA tournament finals last year when Penn State got on that roll. You saw it coming. And it was like, bang, they win 103. Bang, they win this match. Bang, they win this major decision. And when Brunowski went out there against Hepner, and that's a match that clearly I think both you and I would say Hepner, nationally ranked, Ironman placer, favored over Brunowski. And that kid went out there, and I mean, he was on fire. He looked like that third monkey trying to get on Noah's Ark with the raindrops coming down. And I mean, he won a 6-2 decision. And I mean, he just scrambles, wild match. And if you watched over, you could kind of see how the Montini bench, all the guys were feeding off of each other. They were fired up. And, I could see the coaches on St. Edward, trying to rally their guys. Now, Woods got the win at 132, 4-1 over Casimir. And then 138, Andonian beat Mayora. And so, that was really like their first points on the board. But then you come right back, and at 145, Styles goes out there with that sudden victory win over Dover. And I mean, like I said, you looked over at that St. Edward bench and you could just see like air coming out of a balloon. They were flat. They were dead. And then Montini went on to win all the rest of those matches, to include a fall at 182 by Swire, who probably wrestled his best match of the whole tournament. And then when that absolute beast, Dakota Howard, at 195 for St. Edward, walked out on the mat and got a forfeit. I mean, you could see the look in his face, you know. And
well, they wouldn't have had anybody to put out there against.
Oh anyway. No, of course not. Anyway, and that's why I say when it started 220, they had the chance to put Christian in against O'Malley. I mean, it worked perfectly into their favor because when Dakota came out, there was way gone. The dual meet was way gone. And I'm going to say this because I'm familiar with a lot of the top teams in the state. I know Buchanan's lineup, even though I haven't seen them wrestle this year. I saw them wrestle the past 2 years. I'm familiar with their lineup. Saw Blair Academy. I've seen Wyoming Seminary, Paris Graham. In a dual meet setting right now, the way Montini is wrestling, I would favor, they'd kill Buchanan. I would favor them over Graham, over Wyoming Sem, and I would put even money on them against Blair Academy, even though, I mean, let's face it, Blair Academy is loaded. They are loaded. But it would be a good dual meet. And that's just based on what I saw from the Ironman to the point and the level that the Broncos are wrestling right now was extremely impressive. And success breeds success. And when you see a whole team mesh like that and guys go out there, as a team and as teammates, I mean, you see it. And I'm really interested to see the Cheesehead this weekend. Obviously, Montini will be the prohibitive favorite. And we can kind of segue into that right after this because that's going to be a big one too. There's a lot of Illinois teams in there. It'll be interesting to see who's going to battle for second, third, et cetera. And in that pool format where pretty much everybody scores every day.
Yeah, well, as we know, dual meet is really a completely different situation than a tournament.
Absolutely.
It's a momentum sport.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, that was I think it was really a little bit of a roll of the dice putting Christensen at 220. That could easily have backfired.
Oh, absolutely.
But obviously,
O'Malley's a headhunter. He's a pinner. I mean, he was an Ironman placer at 220. And you're right, it could have backfired, but he went out there and majored O'Malley.
Yeah, no, the way it wound up, it's obviously a great move. And it set up what else happened. I'm still having a hard time believing that Mayora lost Andonian, but I guess I suppose that compensates for Bernowski beating Hepner, I suppose, in some way.
Andonian's he made the all-tournament team. He was an Ironman placer, He's a tough kid. I mean, he's a tough kid,
he's just so up and down, Andonian.
He's a bit inconsistent, but he had a good tournament overall as an individual.
Sure,
he had a very good tournament. He
agree.
Did. So now
it was a field that was set up for them to dominate if they wrestled well, and they certainly did.
Yeah. And I say again, if you look on paper and you look at the way the thing went and, people say, really, is Montini really that much better than St. Edward? I would just say they were on that night. They were on that night.
A lot of the same things happened at the Rumble with these matches. going down to the end between teams you didn't necessarily expect. The difference there probably between that and maybe, at maybe the DeKalb duels, lots of pins. And so, I don't know that there were necessarily lots of matchups between really highly ranked guys, because teams were trying to win these duels.
Oh, sure.
But unless it was a situation where you knew you weren't going to win it, and you set it, and the coaches set up matches in advance, which of course happened.
Yeah.
But there were, I could be walking around the 10 mats, and many of these matches were, were 2-3 matches left, and they were 4, 5, 6-point matches, and they were all they were a lot of them just went right down to the end, like some of these matches in the pools at the Clash. It's something you see. It's something you see once you've got those pools established based on the first day's performance. Obviously, You've got teams going to these pools, that are relatively even in their in ability. So you're going to see close matches.
Yeah. And what I really thought was interesting with Oak Park River Forest in the second bracket, because they got Anoka in the first duel, and I think that really played also into their kind of set them up for success, because last year they had Anoka. Anoka, we were hoping for that 138-pound matchup between Jay Rennery and Tyler Ishins, and they bumped their lineup from Ishins up, and it worked out, and they beat OPRF. This time, they did the same thing, only it really backfired out in a major way, because OPRF got a huge, big win at 152, and then with Ishins up, Jack Fisher, pretty much, he's ranked in state, but he's a nobody on the national scene. He went out there in the first period and took Ishins down twice. And sometimes you say, like in a dual meet, a loss is a win. And in this case, Jack Fisher only losing 6-4 to Tyler Ishins was a huge win for OPRF, and really put the nail in Anoka's coffin, because they couldn't match the points from that point on. And after the victory over Anoka, OPRF went on. They smoked Simley, and they smoked Washington. Anoka beat Washington, a really close match. So the second bracket was really interesting in that aspect. It was kind of the same thing, because the Huskies came in, and I think, given all with Madrigal out of the lineup, they really kind of overachieved a bit. And it'll be interesting to see if they have everybody, like if they have Rundle at 106, Okansanya 113, how they do in that pool format at the Cheesehead.
Sure.
Which,
now Ishins is not the biggest 152-pounder in the world. He could have gone 45.
Oh, definitely.
In Minnesota, why? Doesn't matter. Probably better for their line. It's great. That's a great performance by Fisher to
absolutely
to wrestle that well against him. But again, it just goes to the fact that I think these. Some of these Minnesota schools have got some soul searching to do, because I don't know if it's necessarily that much of a down year up there, but boy, this is by far the worst Clash that as a group they've wrestled, and probably the caliber of the competition, I think. Probably has a lot to do with it. Maybe maybe this is where we're going with the continuing the continuing off-season improvement, and the fact that Brian Medlin is going to continue to be running the show for as long as he wants to.
Sure.
And the results have really made themselves obvious. In the time he's been involved.
Yeah, well, and in the past we've seen some of the really, loaded Apple Valley teams. We've seen the great St. Michael Albertville teams. We've seen the great Casa Manorville teams. We've seen great Simley teams.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, right. KM wasn't there, and I'm a little sorry they weren't. Although they didn't have Kennedy at the state Christmas tournament, which was why they finished down in the standings. They were missing a couple of pretty important guys, but I would say Anoka is probably the only team out of the the big names in Minnesota that is as good as they've been the last 2, 3, or 4 years.
Yeah.
The other teams are down a little bit. Of course,
sure.
They wrestled like they were a little bit down too. So
yeah. Well, and Anoka only won the Christmas tournament by 0.5 point.
Yeah, that was that was quite a team race up there.
Yeah, it was
for that tournament. The best they've ever had among multiple teams. So I'm sure it was exciting for them to for them to watch and to witness and to experience. So given that, I'm sure they expected to do much better at the Clash than they wound up doing.
Sure. So looking forward, obviously, one of the biggies is the Cheesehead. And we know Montini is going to be the prohibitive favorite going into that one. I'd be shocked if they don't win it by over 100 points.
We have about 8 teams going there.
Yep, Illinois will be well represented at the Cheesehead. Lockport, Oak Park, Forest, Sandburg,
Mount Carmel, Oak Park.
Yep. And there'll be Minnesota teams there. Apple Valley will be there. Cam will be at this one.
Okay. I hope Kennedy is back, because that will that'll be a more representative picture of what they really have.
Yeah, but that should be a really good tournament. And that pool format, because you got guys on the second day who may have lost a couple of matches and they're still scoring points.
Well, and still potentially in that first bracket. They're probably good. They're probably going to have champs and one-loss guys from the pools potentially in that championship bracket, because it's probably going to be an 8-man bracket.
Yep.
And I guess if they have 8 pools,
right?
I don't know how many pools they're going to have. Probably 8 pools of 4. So maybe only pool champions get to that first bracket.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if that's the case, you might potentially see some second bracket matches that are great.
Oh, absolutely. Cheesehead, I think it's kind of interesting because the 3 tournaments that I look at the most, obviously the Ironman, classic individual type tournament, nationally, tons of teams. Then I look at the Clash, dual team format. And then I look at the Cheesehead pool team format. And actually after the Clash, I had a chat with Steve Elwood, and I got to thank him again for allowing me to sing the national anthem prior to the finals bracket, which was awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, it was. It was one of my better moments in life. Just I'll leave it at that. And then the cheese it with the pool format. So you have 3 tournaments, national tournaments, 3 different formats, and gives you an experience in everything. And I talked to Steven. He wants to add more Illinois teams, so I mentioned to him both Mount Carmel and Lincoln Way West. And I don't know if it'll happen. And actually, I think Wheaton North would be a great addition to the Clash too.
Sure. No,
we'll see.
And they would be up for it. They're not
Absolutely.
afraid of anything.
And it's just, I just love seeing our teams go out and compete nationally and do well on the national circuit. And there's some people that like just seeing the in-state stuff, and that's fine. That's fine. DeKalb was an awesome tournament. It really was, and Abe's Rumble, as we talked about.
I'm hopeful that DeKalb could build something for 3A.
Absolutely.
Like Abe's Rumble built for 1A. It would be great to see. Obviously, the time conflict with the Clash is problematic. But they had a great field at DeKalb, and I think you're going to see. There's a real. They're going to aggressively try and get as many good teams as they can.
I would love to see them pull some of these out-of-state teams in here.
And I think they have a real good shot if this is their focus, and it very easily could be, to build in the in the 3A world what Abe's Rumble has built in the 1A world. And the Rumble has they only allow 1A teams in it, and I think that's great. And because it's just a great event just for them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love having the 2A teams in the DeKalb thing.
Yep.
But Aurora Christian did just fine. But I would love to see that be a sort of 3A showcase in terms of in terms of what the potential is, because I think the potential is really great.
Oh, absolutely. And to kind of stay on that note, I like seeing the teams like LaSalle and Mason and Iowa City come to the Dvorak. I would love to see 2 or 3 out-of-state teams come to the Flavin and DeKalb. It wouldn't be hard to draw because they're there.
I think one thing that has happened here is the Flavin has picked up some of the slack of some of the teams that have left the Dvorak. It is a long way to go for a traditional tournament format, and it is a commitment. You got to be you got to have kids that you want to get that kind of competition for, to make a commitment to that kind of event and go halfway across the state to do it. And I'm not,
Absolutely.
And I think I think some teams have started thinking twice about doing that in recent years. I think some of the out-of-state teams have come in because they have had holes to fill in the field.
Yep.
I think the situation in DeKalb is something a lot more appealing to a lot of schools to get the 6 matches instead of the 2.
Absolutely.
To wind up with, in a tournament format, in a lot of cases. So it's why the Cheesehead is what it is. It's why teams are interested in DeKalb. It's why it's why Granite City has kept a lot of the teams it's kept.
Absolutely.
And Lincoln went to the pool format, and that's why they've kept a lot of their teams. So more and more of these tournaments are doing it.
Absolutely, and that's the nice thing about that particular format at the Clash and at the Flavin and DeKalb, because win or lose, you're guaranteed those duels. Regardless, you're going to get those matches.
That's what they want.
Same as she's. Now, the Ironman, and to be brutally honest, if you show up half-assed to the Ironman, you're going to have guys go 0-2 and go home and,
it's
adios,
not for
you're out of there.
It's not for everybody.
No. And I will say this, Corey Haddad doing a nice job because when I had a long chat with him, he said he's going to look at teams and he's going to say, some teams – don't come. If you're going to show up with 6-8 guys, half a team, or even a full team, and nobody's going to get past the first 8, don't come. And I think Oak Park or Forest, honestly speaking, I think Powell was smart in not going to the Ironman this year and opting for the Cheesehead.
They don't have that kind of team.
Because, they would have had 2 guys, Rundle and Madrigal, who probably had a really solid chance of placing high. Maybe a couple other guys win 3 or 4 matches, but at the level that team was at right now, that would not have been a smart move for them.
Right.
And when you go to the Ironman, you look back at the 2000, 2014, 15 Oak Park teams, totally different story. You look at Montini this year, they were solid for the Ironman. I think Lockport last year would have been much better suited for the Ironman than they were this year. They still had a few placers, but, that team was not the same as last year's team, obviously.
No.
But when you look at and that's why I say, as a coach, when you look at your season, and if you're going to wrestle on that kind of level, on a national level, you really need to pick and choose what you're going to jump into. And by the same token, I would love to see, because we saw LaSalle, we saw Mason, come to Dvorak, but I would love to see, maybe 1 or 2 really tough, or 3 or 4, whatever, out-of-state teams come to the Flavin and DeKalb, because it's always fun to face out-of-state competition, whether you like it or not. Folks in Illinois and all you people who just want to love homegrown stuff, it's always great to get out there and get out of your comfort zone and face people, teams that you don't normally see on a regular basis. So, Rob, besides the Cheesehead, what else we got coming up?
The big event tonight has already finished, and in fact, the box score has already come in.
Great.
The lead match in the Northern Illinois Big 12 tonight was LaSalle Peru going to Geneseo and recording a 34-24 win.
Wow.
So number 4 beats number 8. And looking to see if there was anything out of the ordinary happen individually there. It does not look like it. It looks like the one big match that went LP's way, they bumped Seth Antle up to a 120 against Luke Hankhouse, and he got a 6-2 win, and that wrapped up the meet for them. Nice. They gave a 31-24 to lead, and that sealed it with a match left to go. So 34-24 tonight, LaSalle Peru over Geneseo. That was the big match this evening. Plainfield East was at Plainfield South. It'll be interesting to see what happens in that match. The best 2 Plainfields getting together. And not a whole. And Rock Island was at Moline tonight in the Quad Cities. Those were the big ones in on what was not really a big Thursday night of wrestling this week. I'm not sure that's going to change next week when we look at that. But some really good matches tomorrow night. We got a couple of them in the Southwest Suburban with Andrew is going to be at Lincoln Way West. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., Stag is going to be at Lincoln Way East, possible spot in the top 25 on the line there. Mm-hmm. That's at 10 in the morning. I guess
There's
school
breakfast.
Is off tomorrow.
There you go, Breakfast Club.
Speaking of breakfast matches, tomorrow morning at a Huff Hall downstate, Washington is going to be taking on Tolono Unity in a single duel. Mm-hmm. So Washington, of course, on their way to Sycamore for that tournament on Saturday. But they're going to make a little stop and see Uncle Brian over at the RTC, and for grins, they're going to wrestle one of the better teams in 1A, Tolono, at Huff Hall at 9 in the morning. So if you're in Champaign and you want to get up for breakfast and see some really good wrestling match, go on over to Huff Hall at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and catch Washington and Tolono. A couple of good matches in the DuPage Valley tomorrow night. Glenbard North is at Naperville North. Naperville Central, which just cracked its way back into the top 25, is at Wheaton Warrenville South. Mm-hmm. And Wheaton North is hosting Lake Park, which that'd be a good one. Which had a nice recovery in late December. So 3 good matches in the DVC. Mm-hmm. Other stuff tomorrow night. Muhammad Seymour, which is also going to be at the Washington at the Sycamore tournament, is making a stop over in Sterling to wrestle Sterling tomorrow night, and both teams will be on to Sycamore the next day to wrestle in that tournament. Also tomorrow night, Manuka is going to be hosting Marmion Academy in Plainfield Central. Granite City will be at Collinsville tomorrow night and down south. And another match tomorrow night in the Northern Illinois Big 12, Rochelle, will be at Sycamore. The Spartans getting a warm-up match in prior to hosting their tournament on Saturday. And the other tournaments on Saturday, of course, the other big 1A event is the Princeton tournament.
That's a biggie.
And IllinoisMatmen will be broadcasting the finals for that, so be sure to take a look in at that. That's of course we'll be giving props to the teams afterwards, and then that participated both in Ames Rumble and in Princeton. It's a honor roll list of about 15 teams every year, and they're getting themselves ready for the end of the year in a big way. The other tournaments this weekend at Geneva, at Glenbard West, Leiden, at Morton Downstate, Mount Olive, the Murdale tournament, which is also a 2-day tournament, and they've also gone to a pool format. It's becoming a thing here. Also at Polo, Prairie Central, having 1A events. A lot of mega duel events this weekend. The Lincoln Way Central duels will be going on. The Lincoln Way West duels will be going on. They'll be hosting Marion Catholic, HF, Andrew, Maine South, and Plainfield East. Each team will be wrestling 3 times.
Nice.
The Wabansie Valley duels, they'll have Marmion, Deerfield, Yorkville, Crystal Lake Central, New Trier, Lamont, and Lake Park. Everybody will wrestle 3 times there. And also the orange and blue duels at Oswego, as well as the the Robinson duels way downstate. So if you're in one of these mega duel events and you're listening, be sure you get us the results of all the duels that your team.
We always want the results, folks.
And so it's going to be a lot for those host schools to handle. A couple of good quads on Saturday. St. Charles East is going to be hosting DeKalb, Glenbard North, and Rolling Meadows at 9 in the morning. Team will be hosting Wheaton North and Libertyville for a try. And down at Springfield at 10 a.m. They'll have Geneseo, East Peoria, and Triad coming in. So that's all the good stuff going on through Saturday, and so you know where to go if you're not heading up to the Green Bay area.
Yeah, nice to see Wheaton North, Lincoln Way West, and I got to say I like Oster at Yorkville. If there's one guy
he's doing a great job
who can I mean, what a great move. That's the right guy in the right place, in my opinion. Just super move. And I like what Travis Cherry's doing at Wheaton North. And it's good to see a lot of these former Illinois wrestlers getting into these head coaching jobs and resurrecting programs. I mean, that's something I personally.
A Glenbard North guy resurrecting Wheaton North.
I know. I love it. And when I did my Glenbard North podcast about a year and a half ago, I mean, it was great because, both Travis Cherry and Joe Gomez wrestled for Hahn, but then, and we're on the same team, and both were members of the tournament team at the Clash for Glenbard North, and now opposing coaches. And Wheaton North actually went on and, won the DVC in a very tight race, but it's good stuff. It's good stuff to see in Illinois wrestling, and having these guys come back and helping, the programs out. And, it really is. It's a great thing to see. So again, folks,
that's part of the family atmosphere that we all know and love.
Amen. So again, folks, I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Any comments, please? We appreciate anything. Criticism, fire away. We'll be back again next Thursday. We had a lot to cover tonight. Obviously, a lot of stuff going on right now. We're getting into January, and we're going to start pointing towards that end of the season, regionals, sectionals, etc. So this is Mack Bolen. Shoot.
One thing
Go ahead.
I need to throw in is this next week, the winter bracket drawing is going to get released. So we'll have some discussion about that as well.
Oh, yeah, as always. And that's something you and I both agree. When you decide your sectional, individual, and team matchups by a P drawing, come on, IHSA. Really?
Yeah.
Come on. So, again, Mack Bolen. I'm with Rob Sherrill for IllinoisMatmen.com. We'll be back next Thursday. Obviously, Cheese had a big thing. There'll be a lot of other quads, duels, and we'll cover all that again. Keep listening, and we're going to be here for you guys. Have a good evening.